So far in this course, we've seen that markets are better at providing the efficient level of some goods and services than of others. This is related to some important attributes of the goods and services, whether their consumption is rival or excludable. The idea of rivalry is a situation that occurs when one person's consuming of a unit of a good means no one else can consume it. So if I eat this cheeseburger, no one else can have that particular cheeseburger. Excludability is a situation in which anyone who does not pay for a good cannot consume it. So if you did not pay for the cheeseburger, even if I don't eat it, I can physically prevent you from eating that cheeseburger. Now, we'll explore more about the different categories of goods, whether they exhibit rivalry and excludability. Here's a diagram with the 4 categories of goods, and with showing the different level of rivalry and excludability. So the first example are private goods. They're both rivalrous and excludable. So examples are like Big Macs, running shoes, things that you own that you can prevent anyone else from using, and while you're using, no one else can use them. Now, goods can also be considered quasi-public goods, and these are things like cable television and toll roads. So they are excludable. If you do not pay for it, you can be prevented from using it. I personally don't have cable at home. We just use streaming for everything. The cable company is very effective at preventing me from using cable. Likewise, if I want to get on a toll road, I will be prevented from getting on a toll road if I don't pay. However, they are non-rivalrous. My watching cable TV doesn't prevent, again, if I had cable, my roommate from watching cable TV. Or if you're driving on a toll road, that doesn't prevent someone else from driving on a toll road. Multiple people can use that good at the same time. Next is common resources. Now these are non-excludable. You cannot prevent other people from using them, but they are rivalrous. There's a certain amount, and once that amount is used, you can't use it anymore. So examples of this are like fish in the ocean. You cannot prevent someone, it's very difficult to prevent someone from fishing in the ocean, to stop them from going out there and taking these fish. But they are rivalrous. If I catch a fish, you cannot catch that fish because I now have it. And the final are public goods. Now these are non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So not only can you not stop a person from using this good, but if you consume a good, there's no less of it left for me to consume. So I'm able to consume just as much as you. And examples of these are national defense or court system. These are typically provided by the government. If the government provides national defense to me, that's necessarily going to provide national defense for you. And that's going to help you, be safe from foreign invaders. There's no way to only protect just me and not someone, next door to my house. Markets tend to be very good at providing efficient levels of private goods. Now, the person making decisions about how much to purchase tends to be the only one benefiting from the good, so only their preferences matter. So the market is extremely effective in making sure that firms provide the optimal quantity and at the optimal price. Markets are not as good at providing efficient levels of other types of goods. Now, why is this? People can so-called free ride on public goods, meaning that they can enjoy the benefits of them without having to pay for them. So for these types of goods that are non-excludable, or you cannot prevent someone from using that good once it's been produced, because people don't have to pay for it, markets will struggle to properly price it. People also have little incentive to conserve common resources, which leads them to being overconsumed. That's why we hear people talk about overfishing or overgrazing in pastures, because they don't have the incentives to conserve them for the future. So in constructing the demand curve for a private good, the market demand curve for a private good is going to be determined by adding horizontally the quantity of the goods demanded at each price by each consumer. Like we said, it's the sum of all consumers. So if we look at panel A, this is Jill's demand for hamburgers. At the price of $4, she's going to demand 2 hamburgers. And we look at panel B, this is Joe's demand for hamburgers. At $4, he's going to demand 4 hamburgers. So if we look at the market demand, defining the market as Jill and Joe's demand for hamburgers, the demand for hamburgers is going to be the sum of Jill and Joe's demand. So with $4, Jill and Joe, the quantity demanded is 2 for Jill and 4 for Joe. So 2 plus 4 equals 6 hamburgers. So there will be 6 hamburgers in total being demanded in this market when the price is $4. And that's displayed by graph number C in the figure at the top of the slide. Now that was for a private good. Now let's look at constructing the market demand curve for a public good. To find the demand curve for a public good, we add up the price at which each consumer is willing to purchase each quantity of good. So in panel A, Jill is willing to pay $8 per hour for a security guard to provide 10 hours of protection. In panel B, Joe is willing to pay $10 for that same level of protection. So therefore in panel C, when we add these two together, the price of $18 per hour and the quantity of 10 hours will be a point on the demand curve for security guard services. So in theory, determining the efficient level of production of a public good is the same as a private good. It is where the demand and supply curves intersect. But finding this market demand curve for a public good can be very difficult. Consumers may not have incentives to reveal their willingness to pay for public goods. And in practice, it is very difficult to actually get the consumers to pay for those goods. So instead of using a supply and demand, a cost-benefit analysis can be useful to determine the correct levels of production of public goods. Now let's look at another type of good. Let's look at common resources. Common resources tend to be overconsumed. Why is that? While people cannot be excluded from the resource, so they can't be prevented from using it, their consumption is rivalrous, so it depletes the resource for other people. And this can be thought of like a negative externality. Ideally, we would like to make people pay for their consumption with Pigouvian taxes. But when this is impossible, we end up with a situation called the tragedy of the commons, where the common resource tends to be overused. And let's think about why. Because consumption is rivalrous, there's only a certain amount of a resource available, and every time you consume some of that resource, there's less of me to consume. Realizing that, people being rational, they know there's not going to be much left. If they wait and they don't consume something, someone else is going to be able to swoop in and consume it. So it makes sense for them to consume as much as possible in the short run, knowing it won't be there for the long run. This is just like if you and a couple friends pitch together for a couple pizzas. You and your friends are going to be encouraged to overeat because if you only have a slice or two, you don't eat too much, you know that they're going to be likely to come in and eat a lot of the pizza. And they'll do that because they've already paid the price for it. They might as well consume as much as possible. And they're thinking, in their head, just what you're thinking. Well, if I don't consume it, they're just going to. See, just like with common resources, when friends order a couple pizzas together, there ends up being a tragedy of the commons, where people end up overeating the pizza. The source of the tragedy of the commons is the same as the source of the negative externalities, a lack of clearly defined and enforced property rights. When enforcing property rights is not feasible, though, two types of solutions to the tragedy of the commons are possible. First, if the geographic area involved is limited, the number of people involved is small enough, access to the commons can be restricted through community norms and laws. Now, there's places in Switzerland that have old common laws that have developed that are very effective of rationing these scarce resources that are owned in common. So they have forests that are owned in common, where their norms, their laws, their customs have been able to prevent overusage of the resource. But that's not possible everywhere. So the second solution is if the geographic area or the number of people involved is large. Again, remember from Cozy bargaining, if there's a lot of people, then it'll make transaction costs extremely high and very difficult to sort out these problems. Then they can use legal restrictions through taxes, quotas, and tradable permits on access to the commons.